Every morning, you step into a small room, close the door, and take a seat on that familiar porcelain throne. It's the most mundane, intimate, and safe ritual of modern life. But what if, right at that moment, you're committing an act of violence against your own body, one engineered by the Industrial Revolution? What if this utterly ordinary habit is slowly destroying your blood vessels, nerves, and pelvic organs, while the global plumbing industry has spent a century and a half ignoring 300,000 years of human evolution in favor of Victorian standards of decency? Let's travel back to August 16, 1977, Graceland Estate, Memphis, Tennessee. A sweltering, suffocating summer evening in the American South. In a second-floor bathroom, the lifeless body of Elvis Presley is found. The king of rock and roll is dead. He is just 42 years old. Official medical reports will list the cause as cardiac arrhythmia. A sensation-hungry press immediately latches onto the story of an overdose of prescription drugs that destroyed the great musician's health. It seemed like a convenient, understandable, and perfectly logical explanation for a fading star. But the original autopsy reports contain some deeply uncomfortable details that shatter that simple myth. The autopsy revealed a massive intestinal blockage. Pathologists found fecal matter weighing several kilograms, compacted and hardened over weeks, if not months. But the most chilling part, the body showed clear signs of an incredible, almost unnatural physical strain that occurred right at the moment his heart stopped. Elvis Presley didn't die just from a weak heart or an overdose. He was killed by a biomechanical failure known in medicine as the Valsalva maneuver. What is that, really? Imagine you're trying to shove a stuck car out of a ditch or lift a barbell at your max. You instinctively take a deep breath, hold it, and strain every muscle in your abdomen. At that moment, your vocal cords slam shut, and pressure inside your chest and belly skyrockets. Under these conditions, it becomes critically hard for your heart to pump blood. Blood flow to the heart temporarily drops, and your blood pressure makes a crazy spike. The moment you exhale, blood rushes back like a flood. For weakened vessels and a tired heart muscle, that kind of hydraulic shock is often fatal. That's exactly the invisible drama that played out in Graceland's bathroom. Because of a severe chronic constipation, Elvis had to use every bit of strength in his abs and diaphragm just to force his bowels to move. His heart literally burst from the sudden pressure swing while he was straining, sitting on that luxurious toilet. You might think this is a one-off case, a tragic but specific fate for a rock star whose body was worn down by years of bad eating. But the statistics are merciless. The Valsalva maneuver during a bowel movement sends thousands of perfectly ordinary people to the morgue every year worldwide. It's just not something people talk about. Too awkward for the news. But what's the real cause of this breakdown? We tend to blame stress, junk food, a sedentary lifestyle, or genetics. But the main culprit is hiding in plain sight. It's an object that sits in every apartment, every hotel, and every office. Our clean, white, beautiful toilet. We've gotten used to thinking of the modern bathroom as a triumph of progress. The porcelain bowl with a flush seems like the logical endpoint of hygiene evolution. It's convenient. You step into a warm room, sit down at the comfortable height of a regular chair, your thighs at a 90-degree angle. You press a button, and all your troubles instantly disappear into the depths of the sewer. No mess, no effort, total civilization. But this domestic aesthetic is a huge anatomical mistake that we've locked in as a global standard. The sitting position we take as the only possible norm directly contradicts our anatomy. The human body evolved over 300,000 years, adapting the digestive tract to a single posture for elimination. And that posture has nothing to do with a soft armchair or a chair. Every time we sit on a toilet at a 90-degree angle, a silent war against our own nature starts inside our body. We're trying to make a system work that is mechanically blocked from within at that moment. Why has a device meant to bring us cleanliness and comfort turned into a silent killer, taking thousands of lives every year? The answer is hidden in a single muscle you probably never even knew existed. To understand why civilized man became a hostage of his own bathroom, we have to look under the skin. There, deep in our pelvis, lies an amazing mechanism designed by nature for perfect control over the body. At its core is one unremarkable but incredibly strong part, the puborectalis muscle. The Latin name sounds complicated, musculus puborectalis, but it works simply, like a sling or a loop. This muscular loop starts from the pubic bone, neatly wraps around the rectum from behind, and returns, cinching the intestine into a secure knot. Imagine a person holding a taut belt wrapped around a flexible rubber hose and pulling it hard toward themselves. When you stand, walk to work, run for the bus, or sleep soundly, this muscle is constantly toned. It's tight. Because of this tension, the rectum bends forward, forming the so-called anorectal angle. In normal standing or sitting on a chair, this angle is about 90 to 100 degrees. Why is this needed? It's a brilliant evolutionary safeguard. If this bend didn't exist, holding in intestinal contents while walking, running, or suddenly coughing would be physically impossible. All the load would fall on the sphincters, which would quickly wear out and lose elasticity. Nature created this kink so we could live in society without fear of sudden accidents. But here's the trap. The muscle is designed to keep the bowel pinched shut always as long as we're upright or sitting at a right angle, that is, with thighs parallel to the floor. And then you sit on a modern toilet. For your body, this posture is barely different from sitting in an office chair. The muscular loop stays tight. The rectum is still bent at a 90-degree angle. Essentially, you're trying to water a lawn while stepping on the garden hose with a heavy boot. What does a normal person do when water doesn't flow? Instead of taking their foot off the hose, they open the faucet harder, trying to force water through with high pressure. To push everything through this artificial kink in the toilet, we have to strain. We contract our diaphragm, engage our abs, and fight against the resistance of our own anatomy. We are literally forcing waste through a pinched-off barrier. This chronic abuse of the bowel doesn't come without consequences. The constant, excessive pressure radiates in every direction. It pushes down, damaging the blood vessels of the pelvic floor, and shoots backward into the cecum, putting strain on the ileocecal valve, which is supposed to be tightly shut. Under this pressure, the delicate mucus lining of the large intestine begins to bulge outward through microscopic weak points in the muscle layer. This creates small pouches or hernias called diverticula. This condition is known as diverticulosis. Undigested food gets trapped in these pouches, leading to inflammation that can end with a perforated wall and emergency surgery. Here's the interesting part. Diverticulosis is virtually unknown in rural parts of Asia and Africa, where people still use traditional squat toilets. But in the well-fed, civilized West, it's diagnosed in nearly 50% of the population over the age of 60. Half of our elderly population is literally paying for the comfort of the sitting posture with their gut health. And the solution has been hardwired into our genetics all along. For a smooth and safe elimination, the angle between your thighs and torso needs to drop to about 35 degrees. There's only one way to achieve that angle, by going into a deep squat. The moment you squat, a little anatomical miracle happens. The puborectalis muscle fully relaxes. That taut sling releases the rectum. The anorectal angle straightens out, reaching 126, sometimes even 142 degrees. The canal becomes as straight as a taut string. Gravity does about 80% of the work. No more straining your abs until you turn blue, or risking blood vessels in your head. The bowel empties easily, quickly, and completely. So how did we manage to break this perfect natural mechanism? Who convinced humanity to trade their health for a porcelain pedestal? And when exactly did plumbing convenience win over common sense? The story of how humanity voluntarily gave up healthy physiology for a porcelain throne has absolutely nothing to do with medicine or health concerns. It's a fascinating, slightly absurd plot, driven by royal pride, Victorian snobbery, and plain old engineering laziness. It all started in 1592. At the court of Queen Elizabeth I, her godson, the poet and inventor Sir John Harington, was a shining star. A witty and practical man, he decided to give his royal godmother an unusual gift. Harington designed the first flushing toilet in history, which he aptly named the Ajax. The core of his design was a simple but status-driven idea. A monarch simply cannot relieve themselves like a common peasant. A king must remain a king in every situation, which means sitting on a throne. Even if that throne is made of oak, has a hole in the middle, and is connected to a water tank. The squatting posture was considered undignified for royalty, completely shattering the aura of monarchical grandeur. The Queen appreciated the gift, but Harrington's invention was nearly 2 centuries ahead of its time. In those days, houses simply had no plumbing, and the stench from primitive sewers was enough to make your head spin. So the Ajax remained an expensive toy for the nobility. Peasants, craftsmen, and workers across Europe kept using ordinary pit latrines, squatting the natural way. But a major social divide had already taken root. Sitting while defecating became firmly cemented in the public mind as a marker of wealth, elitism, and high social standing. Relieving yourself seated meant you were a gentleman. Squatting was for the poor. The real plumbing boom came in the mid-19th century. London was choking on sewage, and the British government launched a massive overhaul of the city's sewer system. Enter the legendary engineers of the era: Alexander Cumming, George Jennings, and of course, Thomas Crapper, whose name is still forever linked to the toilet. They were the ones who started mass, industrial production of flush toilets. The height of the ceramic pedestal got standardized at around 40 centimeters. Think the engineers measured the length of the human intestine or ran tests on volunteers? Of course not. The 40-centimeter height was chosen for 2 boring reasons. First, at that height it was easiest to connect the bowl to the S-shaped trap pipe that kept sewer gases out of the house. Second, a ceramic bowl of that shape was the simplest to mass-produce in factories by the millions. The puritanical Victorian era also played its part, obsessed with proper manners and a rigid split between the civilized and the savage. Squatting in a field struck 19th century Englishmen as something animalistic, primitive, and indecent. But sitting primly on a porcelain chair, with your shirt buttoned all the way up, that was noble. The Western world rushed to plumbing stores to remodel their bathrooms. The illusion of civilization won out over physiology. We settled onto porcelain chairs, without realizing we were signing a long-term contract for constipation meds and proctologist bills. The physiological bill for Victorian modesty came due later. What did doctors find when they finally decided to measure the effectiveness of this civilizational invention with a simple stopwatch? The first serious attempts to size up the disaster only began in the late 20th century, when doctors got tired of fighting the epidemic of bowel disorders in developed countries. The real breakthrough came from a clinical study by Israeli doctor Dov Sakirov, published in 2003 in a reputable scientific journal. Sakirov decided to test a long-standing hypothesis with hard numbers and a stopwatch. He gathered a group of 28 volunteers and asked them to empty their bowels in 3 different positions. First position, sitting on a standard European toilet 41 centimeters high. Second, on a lowered toilet 31 centimeters high. Third, in a deep squat. The results made the medical community gasp. On average, sitting on a standard toilet took about 130 seconds. Lowering the toilet by 10 centimeters changed almost nothing. But as soon as the subject squatted, the process time dropped to just 51 seconds. What's more, every single participant in the experiment agreed. In a squatting position, they didn't have to strain at all. The whole process happened naturally, effortlessly, smoothly, and painlessly. 7 years later, in 2010, Japanese researchers decided to look inside the human body in real time to completely eliminate any subjective bias. They published the results of a video defecography study in a medical journal. The method was simple but physiological. They injected a liquid contrast agent into the subject's rectums and then recorded the entire process of bowel movement using an X-ray machine. The images clearly confirmed what anatomists had long suspected. When seated, the anorectal angle stayed semi-closed, forcing a person to push with their abdominal muscles to force the stool out. Only squatting completely removed the muscular bottleneck, clearing the path. So what's the price of forcing our pelvic floor to work under pressure year after year? Our bodies pay for it with the most painful consequences. Hemorrhoids, which people often blame on sitting at a desk all day, are directly linked to the mechanics of defecation. When you strain on a toilet, the cavernous tissue in your rectum fills with blood. Under constant pressure, the vein walls stretch and lose tone. The vascular nodes become inflamed, enlarge, and start protruding, turning every trip to the bathroom into a nightmare. But that's far from the worst-case scenario. Repeated straining from sitting slowly but steadily damages the pudendal nerve, the main control cable of your pelvis. This nerve governs the sphincters, the bladder, and the pelvic floor muscles. Physiologists have found that stretching this nerve by just 12% of its original length leads to irreversible damage. In women, this results in pelvic organ prolapse, a descent of the uterus and vagina. In men, damage to the pudendal nerve causes chronic congestion in the prostate gland and weakened control over urination. We think of the bathroom as a safe haven. In reality, every day we put our bodies through stress comparable to heavy weightlifting. If the medical evidence is so clear, why does the plumbing industry keep ignoring our anatomy? And can a simple plastic footstool, now heavily promoted online, actually fix this mistake? Or is it just another illusion? Back in the 1970s, a British surgeon named Dennis Burkitt made a stunning discovery that changed our understanding of gut health. He spent more than 20 years working in rural Ugandan hospitals. Seeing hundreds of local patients every day, Burkitt noticed one remarkable detail. The diseases that were ravaging Europe, appendicitis, colon cancer, colitis, and diverticulosis, were virtually non-existent among Ugandans. In 2 decades of practice, he never saw a single case of diverticulosis in a local patient. Burkitt suspected it was all about fiber intake. That made sense, but gastroenterologists today add a second factor to his findings: the traditional squatting position for bowel movements. Here's why. When you sit on a standard toilet, your bowel doesn't empty completely. Some stool stays trapped in the cecum. That stagnation turns the cecum into a ticking time bomb. Harmful bacteria begin to multiply, putrefactive processes set in, toxins get reabsorbed into the bloodstream, while hardened particles block the appendix, triggering acute inflammation. But for people who squat, there's no such stagnation. Their bowels empty completely every time they go. You'd think that faced with all this overwhelming scientific evidence, toilet manufacturers would have updated their designs. But the industry stubbornly keeps churning out porcelain thrones. The standard height of a household toilet still ranges from 38 to 43 centimeters, and specialized models for the elderly and disabled are even taller, up to 48 centimeters, making an already dangerous anorectal blockage even worse. Trying to fix the problem, designers came up with a compromise: footstools sold under various brands today. The idea sounds appealing. You sit on the toilet but rest your feet on a little plastic step, raising your knees above your hips. This does help get the angle between your torso and thighs closer to the coveted 35 degrees. But unfortunately, it's only a half measure. Physiologists warn, a footrest is a visual trick for evolution, not a real replacement. The biomechanics of squatting are more complex. When you squat without any support under your buttocks, your body weight distributes differently. Your thighs press firmly against your lower abdomen, creating gentle but steady pressure on the abdominal cavity. This pressure acts like a natural piston. Meanwhile, your pelvic floor is completely free of body weight, and the puborectalis muscle relaxes fully. On a toilet with a footrest, you're still sitting on your buttocks. The load on the pelvic floor remains, and the natural piston never kicks in. We've learned to split the atom, send probes to distant planets, and transmit gigabytes of data. But along the way, we broke the most basic, fundamental physiological process of our own bodies, all for the sake of appearances. We traded healthy blood vessels, clean intestines, and longevity for an illusion of civilization locked at a 90-degree angle. Every time a modern person sits on their expensive, heated porcelain throne, smartphone in hand worth $1,000, they think they're the pinnacle of evolution. But their body at that moment is silently screaming in pain, begging to return to the posture of a simple caveman. We've conquered nature and technology, but lost to it in the most intimate detail of survival. And the worst part is, the bathroom's traps don't end there. As soon as we hit the flush button and grab the familiar roll of white toilet paper, we set off a second, equally destructive process. We've convinced ourselves that dry, snow-white paper is the peak of hygiene. But from a dermatological and microbiological perspective, every torn-off piece of that cellulose ribbon is microscopic weaponry slowly destroying our body's protective barrier. Every time we buy soft, scented, embossed toilet paper at the supermarket, we believe we're taking care of our cleanliness and health. It seems like an unshakable standard of civilization. But have you ever wondered why dermatologists call dry cellulose the #1 enemy of delicate areas? What if that white roll doesn't clean, but literally presses bacteria into your pores, erasing your skin's protective mantle? Let's rewind the clock and take a look back at the not-so-distant past. On January 28, 1935, an American corporation called the Northern Paper Mills launched a massive advertising campaign that would forever change our everyday habits. They announced a product with the proud name Splinter-Free Toilet Paper. To a modern person, that sounds crazy. What splinters could possibly be in toilet paper? But up until the mid-1930s, the technology for making pulp from wood was so cheap and crude that tiny, invisible wood fragments regularly ended up in the finished rolls. Buying hygiene products back then was a real gamble. You could easily get a splinter or a painful cut in the most sensitive and delicate part of your body. Before that, people used old newspapers, corn cobs, or pages from free product catalogs, which led to constant inflammation and injuries. Getting rid of those wood splinters in new rolls was marketed by corporations as the greatest triumph of hygiene and human care. Sales instantly skyrocketed. Consumers were thrilled to believe that a soft, dry, white ribbon was the perfect and completely safe tool for personal care. But by eliminating physical splinters, humanity overlooked a much deeper, systemic problem that dry paper created on a microbiological level. Think for a second about the physics of a process we mindlessly repeat day after day. If you accidentally get your hands dirty with greasy grime while working in the garden, would you just wipe them with a dry paper napkin and then sit down at the dinner table? Of course not. You can physically feel that the dirt isn't gone, it's just smeared in a thin layer across your palms, lodged under your nails, and pressed into your pores. You definitely head to the sink and wash them thoroughly with warm water and soap. If you spill a thick sauce on the carpet, you wouldn't rub the stain hard with a dry towel, knowing full well that you'd only drive the grease and color deeper into the fabric fibers. But somehow, when it comes to the most contaminated, complex, and bacteria-laden area of our body, we act against all logic and common sense. We grab a dry, compressed strip of cellulose and try to remove organic residue, lipids, and millions of bacteria with it. In reality, dry paper is physically incapable of fully cleaning such mess. Its structure is too stiff and dry for that. Instead of actually cleansing, it acts like a mechanical spreader. The paper only picks up the top layer of organic buildup, while everything else gets neatly smeared across the textured surface of your skin, literally pressing microscopic particles of fecal matter, aggressive enzymes, and pathogens deep into your pores. We're creating the perfect conditions for hidden inflammation to thrive, all while naively thinking we've achieved ultimate cleanliness. And if it were just about hygiene and aesthetics, that would be one thing. But the physics of dry cellulose rubbing against delicate living tissue poses a direct threat to the health of our epidermis. So what exactly happens to hypersensitive skin when we subject it day after day to the rough mechanical friction of dry, pressed fiber? To really grasp the scale of damage a standard roll of toilet paper can do, you need to set aside the marketing slogans about cloud-like softness for a second and look at the anatomy. The skin in the perianal area is one of the most delicate and vulnerable zones on our entire body. The epithelium here is only a few cell layers thick. To put that in perspective, it's many times thinner than the skin on your cheeks or the palms of your hands. At the same time, this area is packed with a dense network of tiny capillaries and sensitive nerve endings. Nature didn't make this delicate system so sensitive for no reason. But it definitely didn't plan for us to rub it every single day with dry, pressed wood fiber. The coefficient of friction between dry paper and unprotected skin is massive. From a physics standpoint, every time we use dry toilet paper, we're essentially scraping off microscopic layers, giving ourselves an exfoliating scrub on supersensitive epithelium. And in the process, we completely strip away the natural hydrolipidic barrier. That's the ultra-thin water and oil film produced by our sebaceous glands. It serves as the body's natural shield, locking in moisture and preventing bacteria from penetrating the deeper layers of the dermis. Once this natural barrier is gone, the thin, exposed skin is left to face a highly aggressive environment. Fecal residue is highly acidic. The pH level in that area can range from 6 to 7.5. Under normal conditions, The protective barrier handles this just fine. But when the barrier is rubbed away by paper, aggressive organic enzymes start literally eating away at the bare epithelium. The result of this process is chronic perianal dermatitis, persistent inflammation with redness and microswelling. In the International Classification of Diseases, there's a diagnosis that doctors in wealthy, developed countries give out extremely often: pruritus ani, or idiopathic anal itching. In 90% of cases, this complex medical term masks a very simple cause: excessive and overly zealous hygiene using dry toilet paper. When that first hint of discomfort appears, driven by a mistaken sense of being unclean, people start rubbing the skin harder, more aggressively, and more often. They try to scrub the inflamed area until it shines, hoping to get rid of that unpleasant sensation. And in doing so, they kick off a vicious, self-perpetuating cycle. Friction damages the epithelium even deeper. Microscopic cracks develop on the skin, invisible to the naked eye. Bacteria and fungi that normally live harmlessly on the surface of our body rush straight into those wounds. Staphylococci, streptococci, and yeast-like fungi like Candida penetrate deep into the dermis, triggering stubborn inflammation, oozing, localized eczema, and unbearable itching. The skin loses its ability to regenerate naturally because the paper towel keeps traumatizing it over and over again. And all of this happens just because we've gotten used to dry paper instead of plain water. But the physical damage to your skin is only the tip of the iceberg. The real danger runs much deeper, inside the very structure of that pristine white sheet of cellulose. To turn rough brown wood into soft, perfectly white rolls, manufacturers rely on complex chemical processes, and traces of those chemicals stay on the paper, silently slipping into your bloodstream every time it touches a mucous membrane. Wood itself is naturally a dirty brown or gray color. To turn that pulp into snow-white, eye-pleasing rolls, it goes through harsh chemical treatment. The key step in this makeover is bleaching. Until the late 1990s, elemental chlorine was used to bleach pulp. It was cheap and incredibly effective, but when chlorine reacted with organic compounds in the wood, it released dioxins, a group of super toxic organic compounds. Dioxins have a terrifying cumulative effect. They're nearly impossible to flush out of the body, building up in fatty tissue for years, weakening your immune system and triggering cancer. Under pressure from environmentalists and doctors, most factories switched to chlorine-free technology by the end of the 20th century. They replaced it with chlorine dioxide. This cut down the level of dangerous toxins significantly, but didn't eliminate them completely. Residual organochlorine compounds still linger in the fibers of the finished paper. When that paper touches moist, cracked mucous membranes, these toxic substances can slowly migrate directly into your body's tissues. But the chemical attack doesn't stop there. Marketing gets involved. To sell ordinary cellulose for a higher price, manufacturers turn it into something like a beauty product, adding dyes, fragrances, and chemical softeners. The perfume scents, which create a fake sense of freshness and mimic alpine meadows, chamomile, or lavender, contain phthalates. These chemicals are used in industry as fragrance fixatives. The problem? Phthalates are known to be powerful endocrine disruptors. They can penetrate the thin skin of the perianal area, mimic human hormones, and throw your endocrine system out of whack. Synthetic dyes that give paper a pretty pink or blue tint are just as dangerous. Most often, azo dyes are used, and they're recognized as some of the strongest contact allergens out there. With regular daily use of colored and scented paper, allergic contact dermatitis kicks in. You start feeling more itching, burning, and swelling. The real kicker is that people often mistake this chemical reaction for a hemorrhoid flare-up. So they go to the pharmacy, grab rectal ointments packed with even more aggressive chemicals and preservatives, and slather them on the damaged area. That only makes the chemical burn worse, turning a mild irritation into a weeping, inflamed, non-healing wound. You'd think, if dry paper is this rough on your skin and dyes can cause burns, there's got to be a safe alternative. And the market quickly responded to this hidden demand, offering consumers an evolutionary and gentle solution: wet toilet paper. But why do dermatologists and allergists cringe at the sight of these wipes? And why have experts officially named them the allergen of the year? Wet toilet paper burst onto the market with slogans of ultimate care and premium cleanliness. It's aggressively marketed as a delicate alternative to dry pulp, perfect even for sensitive baby skin. At first glance, the marketer's logic seems flawless. Water cleans better, and a moist base won't traumatize the skin through friction. But behind that pleasant coolness lies a real dermatological disaster. Think about a simple question. How can a moist organic wipe sit for months, even years, in an airtight plastic package in a warm, humid bathroom without getting moldy, turning green, or rotting? The answer is simple, but physiologically unpleasant. To keep the wet sheet sterile inside the pack, it's soaked with massive doses of heavy-duty industrial preservatives, antiseptics, and antifungal agents. The main villain for dermatologists and allergists in the wet paper solution is methyl isothiazolinone. In scientific circles, it's often called simply MI. This preservative has powerful antimicrobial effects, but it's also one of the strongest contact allergens out there. In 2013, the American Contact Dermatitis Society officially gave methyl isothiazolinone a very dubious title, Allergen of the Year. Daily, constant exposure of this substance to the delicate perianal area completely destroys the skin's local immunity. The protective barrier just dies off under the assault of harsh preservatives. Deep, extremely painful cracks appear on the skin, along with severe peeling and non-healing ulcers. Patients spend years going from doctor to doctor trying to treat mysterious eczema or fungus, never suspecting that they're applying a toxic concoction from a pack to their skin every single day. But methyl isothiazolinone isn't the only chemical surprise hiding in that moist package. To keep wet paper from tearing in your hands during use, urea formaldehyde resins are added to the cellulose fibers during manufacturing. These substances give the sheet wet strength, but they slowly release formaldehyde, a dangerous toxin and recognized carcinogen. When you use wet wipes, you're not washing away dirt, you're just smearing a concentrated mix of preservatives, formaldehyde resins, and antiseptics across sensitive skin. Then you put on underwear and go about your day. These chemicals stay on your body for hours, slowly seeping through damaged epithelium directly into the blood vessels of the pelvic floor. Unlike skin on your hands or legs, the perianal area has an enormous absorption capacity due to its proximity to mucous membranes. Our attempt to avoid the rough friction of dry pulp has turned into a chemical trap. But even if we forget all about the chemistry, using this paper carries a massive microbiological threat. Why can the ordinary motion of wiping with dry paper trigger severe chronic infections of the urinary and reproductive systems? And why is the porous structure of cellulose completely useless against bacteria? In microbiology, there's an undeniable truth rarely printed on hygiene product packaging. Dry, porous paper is absolutely permeable to microorganisms. Researchers have conducted experiments with strikingly simple results. Bacteria can penetrate 3 or even 4 layers of thick toilet paper in a fraction of a second. Moisture instantly saturates the cellulose fibers, creating a capillary water bridge that lets microorganisms easily travel onto your fingers. You can use as many layers as you want, but on a microscopic level, your hands will still end up contaminated with E. coli during cleaning. This microbiological issue is especially critical for women. Due to the anatomical proximity of the urethra, vagina, and anus, the direction of wiping is crucial. Wiping from back to front instantly transfers bacteria, specifically Escherichia coli, directly into the urinary tract. This subtle, everyday move is the primary cause of the vast majority of recurrent cystitis, urethritis, and dysbiosis. Evolutionarily and historically, humanity never used dry cellulose for personal care. Our bodies simply aren't built for such a harsh method. In ancient Rome, known for its advanced sanitation culture, public latrines used the xylospongium, also called the tersorium. This was simply a soft sea sponge securely attached to a wooden stick. Between uses, it was stored in a container of salt water or diluted vinegar. The xylospongium provided gentle, wet cleaning without scraping delicate epithelium or causing micro tears. In Islamic and Hindu cultures, using dry paper for hygiene is still considered taboo. Religious purity rules, like the Islamic hygiene etiquette of istinja, strictly mandate washing with clean water. From a medical perspective, this ancient tradition is absolutely flawless. Using a bidet completely eliminates mechanical skin trauma. Water gently preserves the protective hydrolipid barrier, doesn't disrupt the skin's natural pH balance, and guarantees removal of up to 99.9% of bacterial residue without smearing it around the body. So why does the entire world stubbornly keep buying rolls of dry cellulose? The answer is mundane. It's a massive business. The toilet paper industry is a colossal raw material conveyor belt, with annual revenues exceeding $30 billion. To keep this conveyor running, about 27,000 living trees are cut down every single day on the planet. We're literally flushing the lungs of our planet down the toilet. We pay double for this habit. First, we destroy ancient forests to produce white rolls, then we spend enormous sums on medications trying to cure dermatitis, fissures, allergies, and infections. We've built a highly advanced technological civilization, yet we're still stuck at the stage of smearing dirt across our bodies with dry wood chips. Isn't it time we finally admit that in matters of personal hygiene, plain, clean water has long since and unconditionally won the war against the cellulose corporations? Trying to tame water and make it serve our daily hygiene was a huge leap forward for civilization. But when we decided to combine the household water closet with a citywide plumbing system, we accidentally created a monster. In Victorian London, the attempt to hide individual waste behind the elegant facade of the flush toilet ended up turning the city's main water artery into a bubbling bacteriological bomb. That bomb unleashed deadly cholera epidemics and forced humanity to completely rewrite the rules of urban architecture. You push the flush lever, the water carries everything away, and you feel relief. The problem is gone from your home, but have you ever wondered where those pipes lead? What if the most advanced sanitation technology of the 19th century, the water trap, first blinded humanity, triggering horrific cholera outbreaks, and then permanently broke the planet's natural cycles, making us waste tons of drinking water just to transport our own waste? Let's jump back to the sweltering summer of 1858. London was hit by a biological cloud so thick that sessions of the British House of Commons were cut short. Politicians and lords rushed out of the chambers, pinching their noses with perfumed handkerchiefs. Maids desperately soaked the heavy woolen curtains of the Palace of Westminster in concentrated bleach, trying to smother the sickening, suffocating stench of rotting sewage rising from the river. The air temperature in the shade had hit 35 degrees Celsius. The Thames was literally boiling. Because of the freak heat, methane and hydrogen sulfide started bubbling furiously from its surface. The water turned a sinister black-brown, and the river mud became a thick layer of fermenting excrement. That catastrophic event went down in history as the Great Stink. The most mind-blowing part? This massive environmental disaster wasn't caused by ancient filth or a lack of street cleaners. On the contrary, the catalyst was the mass adoption of the most advanced, fashionable, and desirable technology of the time, the home flush toilet. To understand how this backfired, you need to see how Londoners lived before the mid-19th century. A city of 2 million people did their business into 200,000 cesspits, located right under the floors of their homes. These were deep brick tanks. Solid waste settled at the bottom and decomposed slowly, the liquid gradually soaked into the deep soil, and the dry residue was hauled away at night by specialized nightmen to fertilize fields outside the city. The system was glitchy and smelly, but it was relatively stable. Everything changed when London's middle class started installing brand new porcelain flush toilets en masse. The water closet abruptly changed the physical state of human waste. Adding 10 to 15 liters of clean water with every flush instantly turned dry, stagnant waste into an aggressive, churning hydraulic mass. The old cesspits under the foundations of houses were never designed for that kind of massive liquid inflow. They started overflowing within days. To avoid flooding basements with sewage sludge, London engineers took the path of least resistance. They began routing overflow pipes from the overloaded cesspits directly into the street's storm drains. But the city's storm sewer system was built only for rainwater. It led straight into the Thames. Within months, that upgrade turned the storm drain network into a giant, open, churning urban intestine. Every day, millions of liters of raw, liquid feces started dumping into London's main river. And that might have been fine, except that the water companies were drawing drinking water from that same Thames for most of the city's neighborhoods. How did a humble invention inside the toilet blind an entire society, making it miss the deadly danger right under their feet? So how did Victorian society, known for its scientists, engineers, and strict morals, manage to overlook the disaster closing in? The answer hides in a small technical feature that still sits under every sink in our homes today. We're talking about the trap. This brilliant yet fateful piece, a curved U-shaped or S-shaped pipe, was patented by Scottish inventor Alexander Cumming back in 1775. How it works is simple. After every flush, a small amount of water stays in the bend of the pipe. That water acts like a sealed hydraulic plug. It completely blocks the backflow of foul gases and vapors from the sewer pipes into the restroom. The trap gave comfortable Victorian society a dangerous illusion of total isolation from its own waste. A pull of the brass flush lever instantly erased the problem from sight and, more importantly, from smell. The process became clean, silent, and pleasant. Cesspits faded into the past, and with them, the understanding that human waste doesn't just disappear. This psychological comfort caused total epidemiological blindness. Back in 19th century medicine, the miasma theory ruled unchallenged. Doctors and scientists were absolutely convinced that all infectious diseases spread only through bad air, poisonous fumes from rotting organic matter. They believed that if a house had no bad smell, it was perfectly safe. The fight wasn't against the real disease-causing agents, which they simply couldn't see, but against the odor itself. And since the trap handled that problem perfectly, society breathed easy. But while Londoners were enjoying the crisp, clean air in their sunlit parlors, the real death threat was spreading fast through the water. The bacterium Vibrio cholerae, the cause of Asiatic cholera, felt perfectly at home in the Thames' fresh, slightly alkaline water, warm and heavily laced with organic waste. The toilet and its U-bend worked like a flawless hydraulic pump, delivering this deadly pathogen straight into London's drinking reservoirs. The major water companies drew their supply right from the Thames, within the city limits, just downstream from sewage outlets. They filtered out large debris, but microscopic bacteria slipped right through those primitive filters, flowing back into people's homes through taps and kitchen pumps. The circle was closed. People were drinking water that had been cleared of smell by their own plumbing traps, but fatally poisoned by their own waste. The payback for this blindness was swift and merciless. In one of London's poorest neighborhoods, an ordinary street pump turned into a conveyor belt of death. In August 1854, the London district of Soho became hell on earth. It was a crowded, impoverished quarter of craftsmen and laborers. Cholera struck without warning, and with such savage force that within days, over 600 people were dead. People went to bed perfectly healthy, and by morning, their lifeless bodies were being loaded onto carts for mass graves. Doctors and officials, still clinging to the miasma theory, panicked and urged residents to burn barrels of tar in the streets and fumigate their homes with sulfur to drive away the poisonous air. But the epidemic only raged on. In the midst of this chaos, a local physician named John Snow took on the investigation. He had long doubted the official bad air theory and suspected cholera spread through contaminated drinking water. But to prove it to a conservative medical establishment, he needed hard facts and solid statistics. Snow took a step that is now considered the birth of modern epidemiology. He personally walked through the entire infected neighborhood, knocking on every door, interviewing survivors, and painstakingly marking each death on a city map with a short black line. When the map was finished, an astonishing pattern emerged. Nearly all the deaths were tightly clustered around a single public water pump at the corner of Broad Street. Snow launched a genuine detective investigation, examining every apparent exception to the rule. He found out why not a single worker had died at the local brewery right on Broad Street. It turned out the brewers never drank plain water. They only drank their own beer, boiled in the brewing process, and used a deep well on their private grounds. Meanwhile, an elderly widow died in Hampstead who hadn't set foot in the poor neighborhood for years. Snow discovered that the woman was such a fan of the clean, slightly fizzy taste of the Broad Street pump water that her servants would bring her a bottle of it from Hampstead every single day. That bottle turned out to be her death sentence. Snow managed to convince the local parish council to remove the handle from the Broad Street pump so people could no longer draw water from it. The cholera outbreak in the neighborhood vanished almost instantly. But Snow got his real proof a little later when, at his insistence, workers tore up the pavement and dug around the pump's well. They found that a sewer pipe had sprung a leak. In the house right next to the pump, a baby had come down with cholera shortly before the epidemic started. The mother dumped the dirty water from washing the baby's diapers into a cesspit that was just 3 feet away from the drinking water well. The sewage, heavily diluted by flush water from a brand new water closet, seeped straight through the ground into the aquifer feeding the Broad Street pump. John Snow proved mathematically, cholera is a disease of contaminated water, not of bad smells. Cholera was beaten in one neighborhood, but the great stink was still choking the rest of the city. London needed a radical, unprecedented engineering solution, and the man who took it on built an underground network that forever changed the face of modern cities. The pressure of the Great Stink of 1858, combined with John Snow's undeniable epidemiological data, finally forced the British government into action. Life in London had become physically unbearable, and Parliament at last approved funding on a scale unheard of at the time for a complete overhaul of the city's infrastructure. They put Joseph Bazalgette in charge. Bazalgette drew up a plan that forever changed the architecture not just of London, but of every major city on Earth. His idea wasn't about biological treatment of waste. The chemical technology for that simply didn't exist yet. Instead, he decided to intercept the sewage flows before they reached the Thames within the city limits and redirect them through enclosed underground arteries far downstream to the estuary, where they would be flushed out to sea during the outgoing tide. Pulling off this massive scheme meant building a complex network of interceptor sewers running parallel to the river's course. The sheer scale of the construction is staggering even today. Workers laid 130 kilometers of main underground brick tunnels and over 1,800 kilometers of street sewers. The work was done under the most brutal conditions, beneath a living, breathing metropolis, and it required 318 million bricks. But there was a major technical hurdle. The traditional lime mortar used in construction for centuries quickly deteriorated in the aggressive acidic and alkaline environment of sewage. So Bazalgette took a risk. He was one of the first in the world to use Portland cement on a massive scale, a relatively new material that actually hardened underwater and only grew stronger over time with constant exposure to moisture. This bold move guaranteed the longevity of the underground tunnels, many of which are still serving London today. To handle the tricky terrain and pump millions of liters of liquid waste uphill, Bazalgette built monumental pumping stations, Crossness and Abbey Mills. The Victorians designed these buildings like cathedrals, with cast iron columns. These cathedrals of sewage were equipped with colossal rotary steam engines, each producing 125 horsepower. Their massive pistons could shift up to 6 tons of liquid waste in a single cycle, sending it on its way toward the sea. Bazalgette's system wiped out cholera epidemics in London for good and set the urban planning standards for the entire industrial world. Paris, New York, Berlin, and Tokyo all copied this principle of separating drinking water sources from wastewater outlets. It saved millions of lives. But this engineering triumph came with a hidden, long-delayed cost. The invention of the flush toilet and the life-saving sewage system broke the planet's natural biochemical cycle forever, and we're still picking up the tab. Behind that Victorian sanitation victory lay a massive ecological debt that humanity keeps racking up even today. You see, the flush toilet and Bazalgette's brilliant network permanently shattered the natural nutrient cycle of our planet. For thousands of years, traditional farming societies operated within a closed loop of materials. Everything people took from the land as food returned to the soil as organic waste. Nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, the 3 critical nutrients plants need to grow, naturally cycled back through the food chain, keeping the land fertile generation after generation. The new Victorian system brutally broke that loop, replacing it with a linear flush and forget model. Instead of returning nutrients to the earth, we turned them into trash. And we turned perfectly clean fresh water into nothing more than a transport vehicle for that trash. Just think about how absurd this system is, now scaled up to planetary proportions. Modern wastewater treatment plants in big cities spend enormous resources and tons of chemicals to purify water to drinking quality. Then that pristine drinking water flows into our homes, only for us to dilute our own waste in it and hit the flush button. On average, a person in a developed country today uses 30 to 50 liters of clean water every single day just to move their waste down the pipe. Even the most advanced treatment facilities today can't fully extract the phosphorus and nitrogen dissolved in sewage. Huge concentrations of these compounds are dumped daily into rivers, lakes, and oceans. That triggers eutrophication, an explosive, uncontrollable bloom of blue-green algae and cyanobacteria. The algae blanket the water surface, blocking sunlight and sucking up all the dissolved oxygen as they rot. The result? Giant dead zones form across the planet, regions where fish simply cannot survive. That illusion of sterility, locked inside a 90-degree ceramic bend in your bathroom, has turned into a global environmental crisis at the other end of the pipe. We created perfect cleanliness inside our homes, but we paid for it with the collapse of entire aquatic ecosystems. And as we keep telling ourselves the flush toilet is the pinnacle of progress, the planet is slowly suffocating under the weight of that Victorian mistake. Our civilized comfort turned out to be a loan from nature, with predatory interest, and the payment date is coming fast.